Ranchav Esamit Beis, and we're still studying the sugya of Beis Shammai. And we're up to Omer Rabbi Oven, which is approximately 10 lines down from the top of the Amud. First word in the line is Mishayer. Afanan Nami Tnina. He wants to prove from a diuk in the language of the Mishnah a support for Rabbi Elazar, who interprets Beit Shammai in the Mishnah at the beginning of our parak, that two brothers who are married to two sisters and they die, and their respective wives, Rachel and Leah, fell for Yibum in front of Yehuda and Levi, that Beit Shammai Omrim, if each one of the brothers was Miyabim, one of the Yevamos, so for argument's sake, we'll say that Levi was Miyabim Rachel and Yehuda was Miyabim Leah, is Yekaimu. And the Mishnah is implying that they went ahead without conferring and consulting with Beis Din. They took the law, so to speak, into their hands. And Yekaimu, we're going to allow the two marriages to continue. We don't force a get. And the diuk of Rabbi Oven is Yekaimu in. The heter here of Beit Shammai was only b'diavad. When they went ahead on their own initiative, they married each one another Yevama, but l'chatchila lo. The implication certainly is that had they come to Beis Din, we would not be matir them l'chatchila. Why? Because we have the Easter of Achos Zekukosa. Achos Kukoso is only D'Rabbanan, and if they went ahead and they got married, then we're not going to break up the marriage b'diavad, but certainly l'chatchila, we would still prohibit their marriage, each one of them, to the other Yevama. And the reason for that is because you have two sisters, both of whom have fallen to Yibum to both Levi and Yehuda. Therefore, each one is Achos Kukosa. If you would argue, says Rabbi Oven, we saw this logic yesterday, that Beit Shammai would hold that Maimar was a complete Kedusha. It's exactly equal to Yibum. Yibum is Bia, Maimar is Kesef V'Shtar, but Kesef V'Shtar is Kedusha Bia. It has the same status as Kedusha Bia, as Yibum itself. And that would certainly remove the Zika. And then, if that would be the case, is why are we hesitant? Why are we inhibited about this? And we wait for a b'diavad situation. Adarabah, l'chatchila. Let's say the following: instead of requiring chalitza, ze yasamayim v'yitcha, ze yasamayim v'yitcha. Let each one of these two brothers, each one of the Yevamim, do a maimar in one of the two sisters. And as a result of that maimar yitcha, because we're holding now, again, this is what Rabbi Oven is fighting against, but the Havamina was that according to Beit Shammai, the status of maimar is equal to that of Yibum, which means it completely removes the Zika from the other sister. And the reason for that is she can't fall for Yibum to him once he has already married her sister because she's an Erva Vachos Ishta. However, Rav Ashi rejects this and he asks the following question. This is the objection that Rav Ashi raises here, and that's why he's going to reject Rabbi Oven. We learned in our Mishnah, not the Mishnah at the beginning of the parak, but our Mishnah, Beit Shammai Omrim Ishto Imo, that if he does Maimar with one of the two Yevamos, then he's allowed to marry her, according to Beit Shammai, of course. And that's not called Achos Zukukasa. V'halazu Teitze Mishum Achos Isha. Now, what does the word Teitze mean? Usually the word Teitze means we break up the marriage. That's not what it means here. Teitze here means Teitze Mizikas Yibum. She doesn't have an afil for Yibum. And Teitze means she can go out and get married to anyone. without chalitza, mishum achos isha. Because right now we see that she has the status of an erev of achos isha, and therefore she doesn't fall for yibum. Although she did fall for yibum initially, but now once he implements a Maisa of Maimar, which, according to Beit Shammai, will make her into Ishto, then the other Yevama now at this point becomes Achos Ishto. That's why the Gemara uses the term Achos Ishto, not Achos Kukasa, but now it's Achos Ishto because Beit Shammai recognized the validity of the Maimar. And the Mishnah seems to assume that Leah, right, the sister of the one who received Maimar, that was Rachel, who received the Maimar, she can get married. And all that happened so far at this point in time is that Reuven was Makadesh with Kesef or Shtar Rachel. He did not consummate the marriage. He did not take her into the chuppah and have beer with her. So there was never a yibum. It's only Maimar. And yet that Maimar removes the Zika to the second sister, to Leah, such that she doesn't need chalitza. And that's against Rabbi Elazar, because Rabbi Elazar says that no, there's no such thing as complete dechia and upgrading the status of Maimar to that of marriage, of full-fledged marriage. And therefore the other sister, that's Leah, would require chalitza. So we worked very hard, Rabbi Ovid, based on Rabbi Elazar, to assume that even according to Beit Shammai, Maimar is not a dechia gemura. It's not considered a full-fledged marriage, such that the other Sarah, we'll call her Leah, is achos ishto. She still requires chalitza. That's the thesis of Rabbi Elazar. But now we're seeing just the opposite. The dik in the Mishnah is Velazu Teitze. Teitze means she can go out, marry anyone she wants to. She doesn't need chalitza. So obviously, according to Beit Shammai, Maimar is a dechia gemura, completely rejects and undermines and invalidates the zika to the other, right, to Leah. Ella. Therefore, if you want to differentiate between the Mishnah at the beginning of the parak and our Mishnah, is Yevama de Chazil Lekulu, Chazil Miktsase. Yevama de Lo Chazil Lekulu, Lo Chazil Miktsase. What does it mean? That we have a discussion here emphasizing the sequence. At what point in time did Reuven do Maimar with Rachel? Was it before his brother Shimon died and Leah fell for Yibum, or after his brother died? And now we're talking about a case of Yevama de Chazil Lekulu. Chazil Lekulu means she is suitable, Re'uya, not only for Chalitza, but even for Yibum. Why? Because Shimon is alive and well. There's no problem of Achos Kukaso, because there's no Zika, there's no Nefil for Yibum from Leah, from Shimon's wife. Shimon's alive. So at that moment in time, she is Chazil Lekulu. Chazil Lekulu means even for Yibum. And therefore, Beit Shammai say in that case, we're not going to insist that even after Maimar, Leah requires Chalitza. No. We're going to say that in that case, since Rachel was chazir lekulu. Therefore, she, through her maimar, will now remove the zika to Leah, and Leah therefore takes she can go out and marry anyone. So that the situation of Leah is such that she cannot block and prohibit Yibum from Ruvain to Leah. Why? Because she's out of the picture. She doesn't have a zika as far as Levi is concerned. Meaning, when Shimon dies, then according to Beit Shammai, there's already been Maimar before his death, and that Maimar to Rachel will undermine the zika to Leah. However, in conscious that there's a Yevamot lo chasi l'kula. What does that mean? That means that before Ruvain performed Maimar, Shimon had already died, Leah had already fallen for Yibum, and therefore it's lo chasi l'kula. We have the achos zikukasa problem here, so you cannot implement Yibum. The only option you have is chalitza. Is lo chasi l'miktsasa. Therefore, in this case, Maimar does not have the kinyan power to be docha the zika to achosa, because now the zika is already in existence even before the Maimar. So, in a case where two Yevamots fall in front of two brothers, that's our case now that he hasn't done Maimar yet, because Ruvain waited, so to speak, too long, and in the interim, Nebuch, his brother Shimon, died. So now he's got two Yevamots that fall to Levi. In such a case, we have a chos kaso, and there's no heter of Yibum. There's only a requirement of chalitza, and that's called lo chazia l'kul, lo chazia l'miksaso. And the maimar of Ruvain to Rachel is not strong enough and powerful enough to be doche the zika of Leah to Levi, and therefore Levi has to give chalitza to Leah. Boy, Rabba has a son. Maimer lebeit Shammai is suinosa or erisinosa. We've already seen that Beit Shammai upgrades the status of Maimer. It's not just some sort of an attachment, a rabbinic recognition. It's ishus. But now the question is, says Rabbi, what level of ishus is? I think I was going to ask enough. But is it like Erison, or is it all the way? It's like Nisur. Now again, Maimar means Kesef and Shtar. That's clearly Erison. Why does Rabbi have a Havamina to identify Maimar as Nisuin? How can it be Nisuin? Nisuin requires Bia. But the answer is because we're talking about Zikas Yibum. And when we're talking about Zikas Yibum, there already is an ishus relationship between the Yavam and the Yavam. And now his Maimar is taking us across the threshold and bridging the gap between Erison and Nisuin. And therefore that's the status of Nisuin. Abai was a Talmud of Rabbah, so when Rabbah raised this question, Abai wanted to know what's the nafkamini, not just asking some conceptual, theoretical question. If you're talking about the status of the Yavam. Now, when a man marries a woman, he is the Yoresh of his wife in the event that she passes on, but only after Nisuin, not after Eris. That's one possibility, which the Gemara is going to Abai is going to reject, but let's just understand the Havamina. What is the status of this Yavam who went beyond just Zikas Yibum and he added Maimar? And Beit Shammai recognized Maimar. See, it's even Docha the Zika to the second sister. Would that Maimar be considered Nisuin, such that now in an event that after the Maimar she passes on, he would inherit her. He wouldn't go to her relatives. Another nafkamina would be Litamilo. Let's say she dies, and he's a Kohen. So Kohen is allowed to be Mitame to his wife in order to bury her. But that's only if she's a Nesua, not if she's an Arusa. And the nafkamina is this Yavama that got Maimar, and now she died. Would her Yavam after Maimar be Chayav in Kvura? And if he's a Kohen, he's allowed to bury his wife. He's obligated to bury his wife. Number 3, the Hafer Nidorel. We're really getting a picture here of Ishus. What are the various dimensions of Ishus? Number 1 is Yerusha. Number 2 is Hafaras Nidorel. And finally, if he's a Kohen Litamil. So the law is that after Erisin, the husband cannot be Mefer his Nidarim, Har Nidarim, alone, but rather he's a partner together with her father. After Nisuin, she leaves the Rishus of her father entirely, and the Baal gets exclusive rights over Hafaras Nidarim. We want to know this Yivama who got Maimar, according to Beit Shammai, whether or not he would be made for his Har Nidarim without the approval or disapproval of her father. So we have a possibility of a threefold suffering, and Abai rejects. Hashta Arusa bi Alma, Tony Rabbi Chia, Ishto Arusa lo Onen, lo Metamed, V'chein he lo Onenes, V'lo Metames lo. Mesa Eni Yorsh, Mesu Gove Subas, Ovid by Maimar Mipoy. The Gemara says that Maimar is less than Eris. Again, we thought that Maimar supersedes Erisin in terms of the scale, the hierarchy of the Ishus. It's on a high level of Ishus, closer to Eishus Ish Gemura, because it's built on Zika. The Gemara doesn't have that spot. Abai at least doesn't have that spot. And Abai is saying that Erisin is a lot greater than Maimar. And I think what he has in mind is that if a man has a relationship with an Arusa who's married off to someone else, then he's Chayav Misa for that. He's Chayav Misa. That would not be the case in a Yavama who has Zika, where Bia would probably come under Chavim Lavin, and even after Maimar, but not a Chayav Misa. So again, Reb Chia says, Ishto Aruso lo mentamila, and lo, he lo mentami slow. We'll see what that means in a minute. And in Yarsha, and he doesn't inherit him. He doesn't mention Hafaras Nidarim. A little bit surprised. Anyway, so let's go through the case. What is lo onin? Below Metamila. Again, lo Metamila means he doesn't bury her after Eris, and he doesn't bury her when she dies because he's a Kohen. What does it mean, Onain? So Onain has two dinim. One is that he's not allowed to eat kachim, and I think trying to remember. Maybe you remember. He's possibly avoda, unless he's a Kohen God. That's what I seem to remember. I don't find it. Do you have it maybe in your notes? Steve, you have a Gemara? No. No. You're listening Balpeh. I don't really hear you, but from what I can read your lips, basically he's telling us that he's a G.
I have a Gemara, but I don't have the art scroll, so I don't have any other commentary.
All right. So what do you remember from your past experience? An onen, I think, is kosel avoda, no? Unless he's a Kohen God. Okay, so anyway, what? He says something there? What does he have on onen? He must have some translation of the word onen.
The cultural ties person is an onen, subject is was, onen may not eat.
Oh, this is what I wanted. He not eat Masechet Yevamot.
Portions.
Oh, I see. Okay, so he's talking about Achilas Kodshim. So an onen is enjoined for Achilas Kodshim. You can trust me on this. Again, usually my memory is faulty, but I think I remember correctly that he's kosel avod. I'm a little surprised he doesn't mention that, but that's how I remember.
Oh, wait a minute. The next one is the context of committing over Torah refers to it as his.
Right, she'era. She'era zuish
does not apply to
right, only after era, after Isur. Right. Okay. Next. Now, what does it mean? He lo onenes lo metamisla. So now we get back to my Sasheni and Kodshi. So she's an Arusa, and if she has a din of an Ormenes, then she would be enjoined from eating Kodshi on the day that her husband died. But now we're saying that doesn't apply in Eris, it only applies to the suit. And what's Lo Mitamis Lo? He died. And apparently a wife is obligated to guarantee that her husband gets the proper burial. So it seems that not all Rishonim, but Rashi holds that if it would have been after Nisuin, then she would be obligated to bury her husband, her late husband. And she doesn't have to do the burial, but she has to make sure that it's done. But here, since it's only Erisin, she is not considered someone that has to be Osek Big for us. Now he writes here, Asura litamelo in meis berega. What does that mean? Just a second. So he tells you to look in the Yalkut Mefarshim. Think. Right, it says he rakol schurch. I mean, she's not obligated in aliyah l'rega. So what's the problem with Tuma? Once again. He says, Kol Yisrael mitzuvim shaloli tame berega. I think I know what he's talking about. This has nothing to do with aliyah l'rega. So it's interesting. What's the din of a kohenes? That's the bas kohen, and her husband dies. She's fully married. I'm talking about Nesuah. Apparently, she has to bury her husband. And that's a big chiddush because the Rambam Shita, for example, is Kohenes Eino Mitzuvos Lipame Lebaleim Klal Afilu Nesuos. I'm not sure exactly what the whole issue is because I don't believe that a Kohenes is enjoined from being Mitame Leves. You got to be a Kohen, a male Kohen. I don't know. I guess the question is whether there's a mitzvah and a chiyuv to bury your husband. Rashi here seems to assume that there's a chiyuv for a wife to bury her husband. But here in this case, it's only Erison that her husband died, then lo matami. She's not obligated to bury him. Next, Mesa Ena Yarsha, Mes Hu Gova Ksubasa. So this is the exception to the rule. Right? All of the other cases, all the other dinim in this Brisa of Chia fit into one consistent pattern. Namely that Erison does not create a marriage relationship, not for Tumah, not for the din of Onanim, and not for the din of Yerusha. However, with regard to Ksuba, collects her Ksuba in event that her husband dies, even though she's only in an Arusa. Which, if I remember correctly, that's not so posh from the Gemara Ksubas. I guess they wrote the Ksuba B'Shas Erison, and then she collects the Ksuba anytime after Erison, if he dies or divorces.
So here it says, while a husband ordinarily does not assume that he should fill the suit, he may, if he would, obligate himself time during errors.
So it's like an option. Okay, that makes sense. Once he writes the Ksuba B'Shas Erison, then he's already mischayev to the Ksuba, even if he'll die before the Suin. Oh, now we get to the Kal Vachomer of Abaye, based on the Brisa of Chia, is Avivei Maimar. Boy, it goes without saying that if it was only Maimar, then we would not have the status of Erison. And that means that Rabbah, I don't understand your question. You're asking whether after the Maimar he inherits his wife, he buries his wife, he's a Kohen, whether he is made for Nidarim. It's a Kal Vachomer. I mean, Maimar is on a lower level than Erison. And if an Erison none of these dinim apply, then certainly with Maimar, none of them apply.
So outside of this, Yibum situation, would be a risk.
Well, yeah, normally if it's not Yibum, the Maimar is Eres, Kesef Shtar and Bia. But
So
now,
this is downgraded
since, right, because of Yibum, because Torah says that the only way he can acquire her as his wife is through Bia, through Yibum. And the Torah excludes Kesef and Shtar.
Would you mind if I open the window?
Hey, please take care of that. You don't mind. The Ella, now we have to reinterpret the suffix of Rama. Li Mesira L'chuppah. My. Nisuin Osa, the Lobai Mesira L'chuppah, Odilba Erison Osa, Ubai Mesira L'chuppah. All right, so here we have to introduce another element into the equation we weren't dealing with until now. The law is the following: Arusa eno nases nesua elo kishemoseres es atzma lechupa mirtzona aval ba leha orus bal karcha ein ze nesu. I mean, that to me that's a chiddush, but that's what he says. So what happens now if after Maimar he would have Bia without Mesira L'chuppah, and she doesn't agree to Nesuin. And Maimar Nesuin Ose means what? Nesuin is not Midin Eris. Oh, he has the word Achana here. I don't know if that he throws me for a loop. Here. Sounds like we're talking about Maimar, but now the Gemara is saying that Maimar for sure does not create Nesuin. Eino ma'akivus hanesuin b'bia in yavam hapogem vimta. Let's see it again. Hello. The Indian Mesira L'chuppah. Aye. The Suin Osa. The Loboy Mesira L'chuppah. Dilma Erison Osa Uboy Mesira L'chuppah. Ola Mirtsona. Manis L'chuppah Bola Mirtsona. Kadesha Te Osa Mesua. I have it, but I'm not totally comfortable, but let's see if we can make some sense out of it. There's a basic fundamental difference between Erison and Zikas Yimu with regard to Bia. In a case of Erison, Bia, in order to clinch the Suin, in other words, to bridge the gap between this Erison and the Suin, that Bia has to be Mirtsona, which means it operates Midine Kinyonim, and she has to have a dasmak. So if it's against her will, that Bia becomes a Bia's nuts. It cannot effectuate the Suin. So we need Ritzona. But in the case of Yimun, all you need is Bia. You don't need Ritzona. She doesn't have to agree. The Bia itself will create full-fledged issues as a Kinyan Yibum, even without what's called in the Gemara's language, Mesira L'chuppah, meaning she doesn't have to agree to this chuppah, meaning to this Nesua. She becomes a Nesua, even Baal Karch. Now, he does Maimar and then Bia. How do we view that Bia? Should we view it as a Bia of Erison, meaning after Erison, which would require her agreement for Nesuin? Or should we say that the Maimer didn't change anything and her status is that of Yevamot? And in case of Yevamot, you don't need Mesira L'chuppah, and even against her will. But if we say that Erison now, Maimer now sets up an Erison situation, meaning universal kinyonim, not the special unique kinyonim of Psikas Ibru, then in order to bridge the gap from Erison to the Suin, what you would need is her ratzon, which is called Moseres Atzma L'chuppah, which is very strange. Why would, according to Abai's interpretation, why would Rabbah raise the possibility that Maimar would undermine the normal situation that the Torah recognizes with regard to Yibum? So let's read it in the Gemara. Ve'ela le'inya mesira l'chuppah. Man. Now, should we treat this as a classic Erison or not? Nisuin Ose. Again, the words Nisuin Osa are very difficult here, but what I think the Gemara means with the words Nisuin Osa is that just like in Bias Yibum, that Bia creates Nisuin, in and of itself, we don't even need her approval. That's the power of the Maisa Yibum, the Maisa Bia. So that same Maisa Bia, in the case of Maimar, would create Nisuin. And therefore, lo boy Mesir l'chuppah, she doesn't have to approve and agree that this Bia should be a Bia's Kinyan. And even if she doesn't have any approval for that Bia, she becomes a full-fledged Nesua through that Bia, Odilma Erisinos. That the Maimer now changes the whole mechanism. Again, I don't know how it undermines the mechanism, that I can't figure out. But just in terms of understanding the Gemara per se, Maimer now sets up a normal, what we call Erisin, stage 1, Nisuin, stage 2 sequence. And if you're in the sequence, in the ballpark of Erisin Nisuin, then you need Mesira Oseres Atzma L'chuppah. Ubai Mesira L'chuppah. If the Bia was without her approval, it would not effectuate a Kinyan Nisuin, which it normally would if it was just pure Yibum, even without Maimon. Just don't understand how you can do away with the Doraisa. Maybe that's what Abai is going to say. Maybe let's read a little bit weiter. Sometimes you get stuck, and you see the Gemara Behemshech touches on your very problem. Amaleh, I guess Abai now is challenging Rabbi's Suffolk. Ashta lo avad ba Maimar. If he hadn't done Maimar, what would be the derisive structure? It's a structure of Yibum. And the structure of Yibum, Bias Yibum, creates a full-fledged Ishus even against her will. Is Ksiv Yevama Yavo Aleha. What does it mean, Yevama Yavo Aleha? He has beer with her, and that's it. Now she's a full-fledged Ishus. He's Konik Kinyan Gomer. I feel about Karch. Maimer is bringing it even closer to the Ishus. Certainly not reversing the process. But it's not exactly our question, but it's like 2 drops of water almost. He's saying that Maimer for sure should not upset the structure and the existence of Ishus as is Midin Yibum, because she's still Yevama. And therefore, it should work even Bal Karcha without Mesir Zachar, even if Lo Masrat L'chup. But he points it out that Maimer is taking me even closer. Let's say, for example, you start with Zika, we'll call that 50, and then you end up with 100 when there's Bia. Now in the middle, you have Maimer. Maimer surely jacks it up from 50 to 70 or 80, whatever it is, such that now the Bia has less of a distance to achieve full-fledged Ishus than it did without the Maimer. So if without the Maimer, Bia, even Bal Karcha, takes you from 50 to 100, how much more so when you've progressed and intensified the Ishus, upgraded it with Maimer, certainly Bia should clinch the Nesu. Omalei, I guess Rabba is now defending his Safek in Shani Omer Kala Osa Maimer Biyavimto, Archa Mimenu Zikas Yevamim V'chal Alea Zikas Eris. I don't get it, brothers. Unless he's saying that Zika is the Rabbanon. In assuming Zika is the Doraisa, this makes no sense whatsoever. See, what daf are we on now? Rabba is topic. John, you have a Masifta, am I correct? So if you want to follow me inside, this is Yalkut Biurim page Kuf Yud Zayin in the pagiation on the right side. He says Rabba Nistapek Lidas Beit Shammai. Whole suffix of Rabba is only going to Beit Shammai. Hasorim Shamaimar Konim min Torah. Ima Maimar Gorea min Zika. So if the Torah recognizes Maimar, then the Maimar replaces Zika. Below Toil Bil Balkarch. So if it would have been Zika, then Bia Balkarch would be Konet. She becomes a full-fledged HSC, she'll need a get. But if Maimar undermines and replaces the Zika, now we need a Bia Mirtzona. Because now she's not considered a Zkuka Liyavam, she's considered Arusa. That's the power of the Maimar. I just don't understand how Maimar could undermine the Zika. Now he adds a Karen Ora. I don't know if I'll understand this. He says, Lefi ze loshen asofek im a Maimar osa nesuin ain't a medugdak. Yeah, that's what we said. Maimar osa nesuin didn't make any sense to us. So a loaded topic in Maimar kodel in nesuin, ella im eno mafkia ezika sayibum vitol bia achrav afil balkarch. Now he quotes a Tosa Rush. Suin osa uboy mesir lechupa. Which a Maimar mafkia zikas yivomen. Okay, so it just repeats itself over and over again, the same language, that Maimer is mafkia zikas yibum. I don't understand how that works. I mean, I have a chatzi nechama because he says this is only according to Beit Shammai, who holds that Maimer is doraisa. But what was the Torah saying when it recognized Maimer? And the answer is it recognizes Maimer as a replacement of Zika, which in a funny sort of sense moves backwards. It's a regression because Zika is that much more powerful than Maimer. The distance between Zika and Nisuin is a skip and a hop. It's a Bia Balkarach. Whereas Maimar, now replacing the Zika, moves you backwards. And now you're going to need to create Nisuin, you're going to need a Bia Mirtzona. But according to Rabbah, that's what the Torah meant when it told us that Maimar is Kona B'Yavimta. The thrust of what the Torah was saying, as mind-boggling as it sounds to us, is that Maimar replaces Zika. You shift from a Yevamatika Zika marriage to a real bona fide Erison marriage. And the nafkamina is that now you need Pia Mirtzona and not Balkarch. Very difficult. Again, the Chatzi Nechama here is that we're holding like Beit Shammai, which would mean that none of this is Lalacha. This is like a pilpul for Beit Shammai. You know, I think the Sefer of Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, what's it called? The Sefer Boyer or whatever it is, they says that loss and love, we're going to pass like Beit Shammai. I don't know. Wow. This is really wild. Okay, so now we're up to Tashma. Shomeres Yavam Bein Shenofel Lefnei Yavam Echad Ubein Shenofel Lefnei Shnei Yavamim. Rabbi Lezer Omer Yofer. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Li Echad V'lo L'Shnayim. All right, this is more. I think we'll leave this for Sunday. Mirz Hashem. Oh, now I have to talk to you about Sunday because I have again this commitment on Sunday to teach at the NCSY Center. So let's just see. So normally, what time do we start? At 9:35. Question is, Rabbosai, would it be okay for Sunday if we start at 9? That's the question. If that's doable. Not a problem for you, Jeff.
Worst case scenario is.
Okay. You know, you always have that option. So what say thou?
I'm okay with that.
John, you're okay? Okay, so Bli Neder will meet on Sunday at 9. And then the following shir would be later on, would be like, say, double check if I have something on Sunday. Lately, I've have various tests that I have to take. See. Second. You know what I think, just to relieve a little bit of the pressure with the time and so forth and so on, unless you hear from me otherwise, we'll meet from 9 to, let's say, a few minutes before 10. And that's going to be it. I'm not going to teach that other shir that I normally teach. That'll be for Monday. But again, I still want to double check the schedule, but I might be able to shift things around. I'll let you know. All right then? Okay, great.